Hello, welcome to Law and Ethics Med 120. This is Lily Mott. I will be recording a voiceover for the PowerPoints in order to help with some of the litigation terminology, and that litigation just means law terminology. So hopefully this will help you with more understanding of the course. Also, please make sure you read your chapters before you do your quizzes, and let me know if you have any questions. Learning outcomes. So there are 3 learning outcomes for this chapter, and the learning outcomes are basically the objectives for what we expect you to have learned during this chapter. So by the end of this chapter, you should be able to explain these things. So first, you should be able to explain why knowledge of law and ethics is important to healthcare practitioners. Also, I need you to be able to define law, ethics, and moral values as used in healthcare by healthcare practitioners, and also be able to discuss the characteristics and skills most likely to lead to a successful career in one of the healthcare professions. All right, so we have our key terms for slide 3. So these are some of the terms that you should become familiar with, especially when it comes to your exams and your homework assignments. Reasons to study law and ethics. So you might be thinking, why do I need this class? Or you might be feeling intimidated because of the word law and ethics and medical law and ethics. It gets some people a little nervous. I don't want you to be nervous when it comes to this. Hopefully I will explain it thoroughly. If there are any questions after you listen to the slides and read the first chapter, please contact me so I can make sure I explain everything more to you. So what are some reasons to study law and ethics? So first of all, you would just assume that you do not want to be sued. You don't want to lose your license. You don't want to go viral in a negative way. Everything goes viral nowadays. So you want to make sure you function at the highest possible professional level, providing competent healthcare to patients. So the first portion of that just means that you're a professional. You all will have an idea of what that means. And as far as being competent, it just means that you fully understand your job and you fully understand the skills and how to properly take care of your patients. You're also following all the training and all the skills you've learned in school, in your externship, and on the job. And then the second bullet point, to help you avoid legal entanglements that can threaten your ability to earn a living as a successful healthcare professional. So that's, what it sounds like. You don't want to be part of litigation. You don't want to be sued. You don't want to have your license revoked or suspended. Those things are public record. All anyone would have to do is to Google your name and the type of license that you have. So if you're a coder, if you're a physician, all those things are public. The focus of law and ethics in healthcare. So the first bullet point, the rights, responsibilities, and concerns of healthcare consumers. So a healthcare consumer is anyone that buys into healthcare or anyone that is affected by it. They could also be known as stakeholders. So that could be if you ever need to get a prescription, if you go to the doctor for any reason, if you take anyone to the doctor, you have to be in a nursing home or a care home, if you work for these companies, if you get health insurance. So basically it'll be any concern of anyone that has spent money when it comes to healthcare. And the second bullet point, the legal and ethical issues facing society, patients, and healthcare practitioners. So right now, a huge legal issue is that a lot of people are concerned with is healthcare itself. The price of healthcare, how healthcare is delivered, which is also part of bullet point 3. People not having access to healthcare, the price of insurance, the price of prescription medications, who has access to free medications versus people that might have to pay a lot of money for an EpiPen or life-saving cancer drugs. So those are some issues that are going on as far as ethics and consumer concerns. And healthcare, the cost of it has continued to rise and it's going to continue to rise. So that's because there's a lot of fraud. There's also a lot of money being spent on products, prescriptions, of course, because there is no cap for how much that they can charge for any prescription at any time. Also, the more technology we have, the more it's going to cost. And we have the largest group of elderly people that that are currently retiring or have retired, the baby boomers. So they are costing a lot. So people live longer, they cost a lot. And we also need a lot more people in the healthcare field. So that also costs a lot of money as far as paying employees. Litigation terminology. So if you watch Law and Order, SVU, CSI, any of those court shows, you might have heard litigation terminology. So some of these. Plaintiff. So the plaintiff is the person that brings the lawsuit. So think of the plaintiff as the victim in the situation. They're the person that's saying that something wrong has happened to them and we basically have to check it out. The defendant is the person that's on the defense. So they have to defend themselves. They have to say either they were part of something or they weren't part of something, and they have to bring evidence. And as far as being liable, that means you're legally responsible or obligated to prevent something from happening. So for instance, if you're at work and you see a bunch of water on the floor and you just keep walking, so a patient might fall later. So basically that means that you were liable for that fall. Same thing if it happens in Walmart. I'm sure you heard of a lot of people suing them because it works. And also if someone goes to your house and you have a nail on the stairs and they fall because of that nail, you're also liable. So that just basically means that you could have stopped this thing from happening and now you can be sued. Litigation terminology continued. So precedent. So basically a precedent is a case that has happened in the past. We have a situation, we have a case, we have an outcome. So the outcome of that case is done. Now, present day, we have a current case. And with our current case, we have to look back at all the past cases that happened before to see what the outcome was. Did the patient win any money? Did the doctor lose their license? How much money did they get? What happened? How long did they have for the lawsuit? How long did it take? How much effort was put into it? How many lawyers were involved? Were TV stations involved? So basically you're looking at a past case from before. So that just means that you have legal precedent. And if you're watching these court cases or these TV shows, they'll say, well, do we have a precedent for this? And they basically are meaning what other cases in the past that relates to this current case to tell you how this new situation probably will go. And a summary judgment is basically a decision made by a court that pleads no basis for trial. So basically the decision is made in court, it's handled, you don't have to have a jury or anything like that. It's just a summary judgment. And a lot of companies like to do that, or they like to settle, because once it goes to court or trial, that brings more attention to it. And most companies, since they have the money anyways, they'd rather just pay people for their silence instead of actually letting it become public. Product liability. So manufacturers, for the most part, cannot be sued if their products are approved by the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, unless the products, like the defect, falls into one of these categories. So the breach of warranty, it just means that the warranty was broken. Untrue statement, so if you have evidence that this company lied about their products. Liability for defective products, so just maybe if they gave everyone mesh implants and the mesh breaks immediately, as far as like fixing a hiatal hernia or something like that, then you can sue for that. And then fraud. So fraud is the most difficult one to sue for because you have to have evidence for intentional deceit. And unless you have somebody on tape saying, well, I know this product doesn't work, but I'm still going to sell it, then it's very difficult because the company or the person can come out later and say that, I didn't know that this is how it would turn out. That's not what happened when we did testing before in our clinical trials. So you would actually have to have evidence of them admitting fault or admitting that they know that this product doesn't work. Product liability. So the Medtronic case, this is a court case that you can read in your textbook, but basically just means that if a company makes a product, a medical product, and it has passed the FDA specifications, so the FDA is the Food and Drug Administration. If the Food and Drug Administration said that this product is okay and is going to work for most people, then nobody can sue if it doesn't work for someone and maybe causes a health issue later. So similar to the previous slide with the Medtronic case, we have the LE8e case, and that's also for product liability, and it gives federal preemption. So what that basically means is that if a consumer is injured, they cannot sue in state court because this product met the FDA standards. So the FDA, when they approve things, usually either it's been grandfathered in, and it means that the product has been around for a long time, so we're just going to continue using it until enough people get sick or upset, and then we'll look into it. So that's what grandfathered means. As far as the federal preemption, it just also means that you cannot sue no matter what. And then also a lot of these companies like to say that you could have looked up the information either on their website, you could have received the information, like if it's a drug, you could have received it from the pharmacy, from the doctor, anywhere. But basically that you could have looked it up, and since you took it, it was on your own volition, which just means it was your own choice. Therefore, you cannot sue, ever. This slide basically just lets you know we are now going to look at law and ethics and compare them. So there is a table in your book, and it has law and ethics side by side. One of the important terms for you to know is the term law. So laws are basically rules of society, and there's a controlling authority. So basically, if you don't follow the laws, you could be fined, be put in prison, or both. So it could be something like running a traffic light, or it could be another thing like performing surgery on the wrong side of the body, because that also happens. Don't do that. Don't be that guy. Ethics. So ethics are basically standards of how we want people to behave in a situation. We want people to think about what's right and what's wrong in a situation. And those morals that you have, they come from your family, culture, society, basically where you grew up, whoever you're around, your internal beliefs. It could be your spirituality. All of that falls into your moral values and ethics. The Hippocratic Oath. So basically, this is the pledge that physicians take in order to do no harm with their patients. You can also find more information on figure 1-1 of your book in section 1.2. Contemporary codes of ethics. So contemporary just means present day. So for whatever profession you're actually going to go into, it has its own professional organization, and you would look that up online. It'll be under your state website, and it will basically tell you how they expect you to act. So if you're going to be part of dental, part of coding, CNA, nursing, medical assistant, no matter what it might be, you have your own professional organization. And basically tells you how they want you to govern yourself, how they expect you to act, how they expect you to interact with patients, how they expect you to do your job. And then also if you want to go above and beyond that. So it says it also increases the level of competence and standards of care within the group. So basically it just makes this group of people be the best that they can be at their job, but it is not the law. So there's no legal authority. So this slide is just some examples of the organizations. There's, of course, way more than this, but here's a list for you to check out. Example code of ethics. So this is for the medical assistants, but of course this could apply to many other professions. Of course, treat people with respect and dignity, especially when you're dealing with patients. So patients might seem like they have an attitude, but it's probably because they don't feel well. So don't think of it as being from you. It's probably come from the situation that they're in. So no matter what, just treat them with dignity, respect, even if they are a little rude or upset or unpleasant. Respect confidential information obtained through employment. Uphold honor and high principles of the profession. Continue your skills and knowledge. It's always important to be a lifelong learner, and try and contribute to the community. Bioethics. So this discipline basically deals with medication in the body. So certain medications, well, actually anything man-made is faulty, so I like to definitely repeat that. So any medication could cause a health issue. So for instance, Nexium is a popular reflux medication people take, but if you take it for, I think it's like 15 to 20 years, it could cause osteoporosis, so weakening of the bones. So it's like, do you want to deal with reflux right now or have weak bones later? However, if you deal with reflux for too long, then it could contribute to esophageal cancer and stomach cancer and all these other things. So it's almost like pick your poison. So bioethics deals with how these pills are going to affect the body, and if it's okay to give it to the person or if it's not. So they kind of weigh the pros and cons. And it would be your doctors. You might have more than one doctor, but they would discuss that. Ethics committee. So an ethics committee is basically anyone that's going to deal with a patient that might be having a difficult issue. So maybe a patient had surgery, it was pretty traumatic, or maybe the healing is difficult, maybe a patient fell. But basically the ethics committee are people that want to make sure the patient is okay. So it could be the typical people you would expect, the physicians, nurses, any other healthcare workers. Social workers might be part of the issue, especially if kids are involved, or the elderly. Clergy, so any religious member that the person is a part of, as far as their religion goes. Family members and community members, it could be friends, whoever basically wants to make sure this patient is doing well. Okay, etiquette. So that's just standards for good behavior. It's how we expect people to act, and also it's like going above and beyond our expectations. And as far as protocol, you're just going to follow the handbook, follow the rules. Qualities for success in healthcare. So in order to be successful at your job as a healthcare professional, make sure you're courteous. So that just means that you need to have good manners. Say please and thank you, smile at people. Don't say things like, oh, this procedure is not going to kill you, things like that. It just makes people uncomfortable. Have compassion and empathy. So empathy is when you actually feel exactly what the other person is feeling, and sympathy is when you feel bad for them. So as long as you have either one or both of those, it will make you a good healthcare provider. And also use common sense. You might have heard it's not that common. Skills for success in healthcare. So it's very important as a healthcare worker to have people skills. So those are traits and capabilities that allow you to get along well with others. There is a book called How to Deal with Difficult People if you need help with that. Also, if you don't like people, you could always be a coder. Technical skills are the skills that you learn while you're in school, so part of your course of study. And critical thinking skills, so problem solving skills. On the next slide, we go over the exact steps for problem solving. Steps in the problem solving process. So identify and clarify the problem. So basically, if there's a situation and you come to learn about the situation, maybe someone wants your opinion or you're just hearing about it. So at first you want to know exactly what the situation is, and you want to clarify the problem. So what exactly happened, who was involved? You want facts, you don't want opinions. So you gather as much information as possible and make sure that information is facts. Evaluate the evidence. So do you need more evidence? Do you need, to look at some files? Do you need to see if one of the nurses left something out? Did anybody make a mistake? Did anybody delete a file, erase a file, do something incorrectly? Do you have the evidence that the patient, was harmed in a situation or maybe given the wrong medication? But just make sure you have all the facts. Consider the alternatives and implications. So basically, you're just thinking of a situation. If someone gave someone the wrong medication, you're wondering, okay, the implication of that, like, could this person have had an allergic reaction? Is it something that could easily be corrected? Is this going to have a contraindication with another medication? And that just means that if you take this one medication and maybe they should be given another medication, is that going to have a negative effect on their body? Because some things can be life-threatening. Also, were there any other alternatives? So it's like, were there any other choices that could have been made in that situation? Or are there any choices that could be made now in order to rectify or to correct the situation? So you choose and implement the best alternative. So you just figure out, what do I need to do with all this information and how do I fix it? And then just go for it. Like, just try and fix the situation, try and solve the problem. So that's where the implementation comes in. It's when you take action. This slide is very important as far as your own morals and who you are and what you want to be known for, and as far as, how you want your family to look at you. But basically, if you are against any certain situation, it might not be the best idea for you to work in a certain job. So for instance, if you are completely against abortion no matter what, you probably don't want to work in a gynecologist's office because you might be you might have to become part of the situation, or it might be around you. So maybe try working in, a different type of office, a podiatry office, or a dental office, or depending whatever your major is. But don't ever put yourself in any situation that will affect your morals and make you question who you are. So it is very important to determine if any decision you're making is ethical when it comes to your job. Besides your own peace of mind and be able to look at yourself in the mirror, you also want to make sure you don't lose your license. I keep reiterating that because it's very, very important. So if you perform a certain act that you are against, have you followed the law and the policies of your organization? So have you followed the rules? Have you looked at the handbook? Have you spoken to your boss? Have you spoken to a superior at your job at all? Because sometimes the situation might not actually be up to you, and that might make it a little bit easier for you. Also, is it a win-win situation? So when we say that, we're making sure that the hospital wins. For instance, if you work at a hospital, and we're also making sure that you win and also the patient wins. So basically, a lot of the times patients want to be heard when they're complaining about a situation, and their complaints could be valid or it could not be as valid as you would like. But just anybody in any situation, even in your personal life, people like to be heard. So that's what we mean by a win-win situation. So if a patient is listened to when they're upset, then they're less likely to sue. And also, it might help you feel better if you helped calm down a situation. How would you react if this went viral? So if it was in the newspaper, social media, Facebook, Instagram, any other websites that people post things on, you don't want to be part of any negative situation, because people say the internet is forever, so it'll be tied to your name. And also, would you want your family members to know? Would they be embarrassed if you were part of a certain situation? Would you be embarrassed? Would it bring shame on you or your family? Would it be something that will cause your child to be teased later? I'm sure you have all seen different videos of people going viral, and it could have a negative effect. They could also lose their job. And then usually if you do something completely wrong and you admit fault, the company will distance themselves from you, so then it'll just become totally your fault. And then also, if you can look yourself in the mirror. So you got to be able to have your own peace of mind, be able to look at yourself at nights, be able to go to sleep, just be able to be yourself.